All right, guys, so today we're going to finish up what we started last week, talking about my strength approach to hypertrophy, or in other words, how I like to apply strength training to my hypertrophy goals. In part one, we talked about the first two phases, right? So you've got your warm-up, which is going to include a general cardiovascular warm-up, some activation movements, maybe some prehab movements, and then possibly, depending on your goals, a pre-fatigue movement. And then you've got your strength phase where you're going to train this very much like you would for powerlifting, right? So whatever that means for you, whether it's an RPE-based program, whether it's a max effort type thing, whether it's a percentage-based program, whatever you find works is really what fits in the strength phase. So far, that probably mirrors your traditional powerlifting program pretty closely. This is where it's going to differ. This is phase 3, which I call shoring up weaknesses. John, in his hypertrophy programs, right, which are not focused on strength at all, he calls this the super pump phase, I believe. But basically, no matter what you're training for, your approach here is to address the things that you didn't address with your main movements in order to create more balance and symmetry. The type of balance and symmetry that you're looking for is going to depend on your goals. So if you're a strength athlete who's in a hypertrophy block, well, then, that balance that you're going to achieve is probably aimed at injury prevention. Maybe it's addressing a weak point that's holding you back in your competition lift. So, for example, if your hamstrings are really weak and you find that they're hindering your position in the deadlift off the floor, this is where you would hit the hamstrings. To go back to the injury prevention, for me, my adductors are a constant weakness. So maybe I'm throwing in some Copenhagen planks. Maybe I'm doing the good girl, bad girl machine. There's no one right answer here, as always. But the overarching plan is that you're going to address your weaknesses. If your goals are strictly hypertrophy based and you're just coming from a strength background, then you can pretty much just substitute in John's philosophy, which is going to be more of that pump. You're just chasing the pump in this phase, and that's totally fine. I think, and I'm guilty of this as well, a lot of powerlifters really think poorly of the pump. They think it's kind of pointless. When in reality, if you're training for hypertrophy, it's actually very important. Not only are you bringing those nutrients to the muscle and looking good while you do it, but you're also stimulating that sarcoplasmic hypertrophy that we touched on last session, which is really important. This is where it gets fun. This is where there's a lot of different ways that you can kind of approach this. If your goal is really just fixing imbalances, right, and you're directed at strength as your overarching goal in your hypertrophy block, I highly recommend that you just keep it basic, right? Stick to your standard 3 sets of 8 to 12, right? You're going to be totally fine that way. Maybe do some supersets if you're bored with this type of training, but make sure you're moving fast and make sure even now, right, you're training the muscle and not the movement, okay? I've touched on this before in multiple videos. I'm not going to rehash it, but I do want to stress the importance of that in this phase. There is no fucking point in doing hamstring curls to see how much weight you can put on the hamstring curl. The only thing that might come out of that is a torn hamstring, all right? Do not just load up a machine or some sort of accessory movement for the sake of your ego. That's pointless. Your ego can come to play when you're looking in the mirror posing or when you're lifting a max effort weight, but for this accessory phase, you got to keep it out. If your goal is hypertrophy, if you're really, really focused on that, then here's where I suggest that you start building in those intensity ramping techniques. So I mentioned supersets. I don't really like that as an intensity ramping technique because I find that even though I really, really like the supersetting movements, I just don't like it if your goal is to increase the overall intensity of your workout. I think there are better solutions that can fit that, right? So things like myo reps. Myo reps, you might know these as cluster sets, rest pause sets, all the same idea. Where you're doing a weight, you're taking it near failure, right? So maybe you have one clean rep in the tank. You're taking somewhere between, let's say, 8 to 12 breaths, about 20 seconds, something along those lines. Then you're cranking out another set, whether it's a set of max reps or it's a set of, let's say, 3 to 4 reps. And then you're just going to repeat that process as many times as is indicated by your protocol. Currently, what I'm doing is I'm using this in my activation phase, honestly. And what I'm doing, and to make sure I don't slack off in the activation phase. So what I'll do is a myo rep set where, let's say today I had legs. So I started out with a lying leg curl. I did a straight set of 12 just to kind of get warmed up, get the blood flowing. Then I added a little weight. I did a heavy set of 10. I rested 8 breaths. I did another set of 4 reps, right? So that's my first myo rep set. I rested about 10 breaths, I believe. And then I tried to get 4. I only got 3, and so I ended the set there. So I had 1 set of 10, 1 set of 4. Neither of those were to true failure, but they were pretty close. And then a set of 3 that was to failure, and that was the end of the set. So that's one strategy you can use. Another is drop sets. I'm sure you guys know how to do those. You can throw in cool stuff like blood flow restriction here. You can pretty much go hog wild, because remember, in this phase, the strength gains aren't as important. Your progression is going to be determined by your results, right? So whether it's, are you noticing improvement in your competition lift? Are you noticing that your weak muscle groups are looking bigger? Are you continually pushing yourself to the limit in this stage? If any of those are true, you're good to go. Don't stress over this, okay? As long as your primary metric in the strength phase is that you're adding weight or you're progressing in some way, even if that means reps or something else along those lines, even more volume. In this phase, really focus on the results. Don't worry too much about the nuances of your daily workout, as long as those results are coming. And then the fourth phase, John calls this the stretch phase, I believe. For me, this is more the recovery phase, right? And that might incorporate some type of loaded stretching, and for me it often does. But there's other things that you might incorporate here as well, right? So one might be corrective exercise. Corrective exercise, in my mind, differs a little bit from shoring up weaknesses, and that corrective exercise is directed at a very specific acute problem. So let's take my knee tendonitis, for example. When I was rehabbing for my knee tendonitis, I was doing a lot of single leg banded work to work on that stability. That is an example of corrective exercise. Shoring up imbalances would be, hey, I know my adductors are weak. They might lead to knee pain down the road. I should be doing more adductor work in the form of the good girl, bad girl machine or whatever. So it's a nuance, but I think that it's an important one to make, because otherwise it's gonna influence your programming. This should not be a high intensity phase, okay? This needs to be a low intensity phase where you're really focused on overall recovery. What is gonna help your recovery the most? Whether it's loaded stretching because you're getting that blood flow and you're improving your range of motion, whether it's corrective exercise, whether it's just a 5-minute cool down on the stationary cycle, whether it's adding cardio because your cardiovascular is weak or your cardio health is weak and you really want to shore that up. That's the type of thing that would fall into the recovery phase. Again, no right or wrong here. One thing that I can suggest is if you're looking for corrective exercises, definitely go on the Kabuki website. I think Hybrid has some good stuff in their corrective exercises, corrective bodybuilding for strength athletes, some type of program like that. Mobility WOD, these are all good resources. I touched on some of these in the activation phase as well, because those phases are closely related if you think about it, right? So one is you're warming up and preparing for the workout. 2 is you're cooling down, you're recovering for the workout, but you're also preparing for your next workout, okay? So I think if you frame it in that sort of way, it can help you to give this stage the effort it deserves. I'm gonna wrap things up for this session. Now we've touched on all 4 stages of the plan. In the next video, I'll get a little bit more into the details about how you can use this method to actually program. So whether it's in terms of designing a microcycle, which you guys probably know is a split, right? Do you want to do an upper lower? Do you want to do a body part? Do you want to do a push-pull legs? They can all work. I'll go through some examples of that. We'll go through some examples of how you might set up the strength and weaknesses phase. Strength and weaknesses phases. So for example, how you might structure your strength phase, how you might decide how am I going to address my weaknesses using myo reps, stuff like that. We'll give some examples so you can apply this to your own training as well. If you guys have any questions that you would specifically like me to address, please leave those in the comments below so that I can be sure to do that in the next video. The questions I got last time were not really directed at this program, so I would ask that you kind of keep them on topic. or if they're not on topic, just email me, right? Email me, leave a comment somewhere on one of my Instagram pages. Do not DM me. I'm not going to get your DMs, but any of those other methods are great. I hope you found this helpful. I do want to give a plug to one company. This is not a company I'm sponsored by. The company is Combat Flip Flops. They've made my little bracelet thingy here. You can't see it, but it says "Be a Better Human." Combat Flip Flops makes clothing and flip flops from the products themselves are produced by women in Afghanistan, and they're made using things like exploded ordnances from wars and things like that. And the whole goal is to work towards a peace movement in the Middle East. And I think that's a really great cause. The products are very high quality. Again, I have no affiliation with this company, but I like to mention the ones that I really, really trust and believe in. And so I encourage you guys to go check those out. CombatFlipFlops.com. I'll leave a link in the description below. Thanks for watching. Make sure you think strong, train hard, and I'll see you next time.